Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I hope that you find this interesting today, which I'm really looking forward to, because Caroline Webb is going to be speaking about iodine and whether it's a friend or foe.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Things Iodine. And is it a friend or is it a foe to our thyroid? Well, hopefully, I'm going to try and answer that for you today. What I'm just going to talk about just now, I'm going to get over the really boring bit, which is a disclaimer. So, any information that's provided today is for educational purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your doctor regarding a medical condition before making any dietary or lifestyle changes and before taking any nutritional supplementation to ensure it's appropriate for you. And obviously, do not discontinue any prescription medications without first speaking to your doctor. Okay, so what we're going to cover today. So there's going to be a little bit about me and just give you a little introduction if you don't know who I am. I'm going to focus down on iodine, how it's absorbed and made into the thyroid hormones and where else it's used in the body other than the thyroid. It's got a specific role in supporting hormones, so we'll have a look at that. We'll also look at how our intake is regulated and what the recommended daily amounts are. We'll also look at what the implications are of when we have too little and also too much iodine coming into the body. We'll also look at where we get iodine from. So that includes foods and chemicals, foods, chemicals, thyroid medications, and hidden sources. We'll also look at what blocks iodine from being taken up into the body, especially into the thyroid. We'll look at some special considerations when you are or during pregnancy and for breastfeeding. And we'll also look at what the situation may be if you've got any thyroid autoimmune conditions, like Hashimoto's or Graves', and also what testing options are available. I'll leave you with some recommended action steps and also some times at the end of the questions. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so a little bit about me. As Lynn said, I am a thyroid nutritionist. I've been doing this role for over 8 years now. I support those who've got thyroid, hormone, and digestive issues to find and address their root causes. I use a lot of functional testing, so more comprehensive blood testing, can be stool testing, hair tissue mineral analysis, etc., to help them feel more balanced, energized, and like themselves again. I too have got hypothyroidism and Hashimoto, so that's the autoimmune underactive thyroid condition. And I've graduated into menopause and I've kept both of my conditions in remission, and they still are. I am a mum. I've got 2 teenagers, so with all that entails, I've got a dog, which you can see there, and I'm a wife to an ever hopeful Sheffield Wednesday fan, so poor chap. A little bit about me, I do love sci-fi, that's my secret pleasure, watching things like that. I love Zumba and I am adoring cakes. Most gluten-free and dairy-free, but I do like a few cakes. On the thyroid side, I'm a multi-award winning thyroid practitioner, board certified strategic thyroid specialist. I'm also a health coach, nutrigenomics specialist. So that means I look at genetic testing to help understand how that can be affected and supported through food. I'm also a naturopath and registered nutritional therapist as well. Okie dokie. So let's talk iodine. So it's an essential trace mineral, which means that we only need a very small amount, and without it, we can't make thyroid hormones that, as we know, are essential for life. We absorb iodine from foods and or supplements into our guts, where it enters into our bloodstream. From there, the thyroid takes it in via a mechanism called the sodium iodine symporter. Think of it as like a little shuttle bus that brings iodine into the thyroid. So once it's in the thyroid, our thyroid cells make a matrix or a scaffold called thyroglobulin, and that's for all the thyroid hormones. And it makes that from the amino acid tyrosine that we get from protein. Iodine is then bolted onto that tyrosine on the thyroglobulin scaffold to form thyroid hormones. So T4, which is obviously what you may take if you're on levothyroxine, for example, that contains 4 atoms of iodine, and triiodothyronine, or T3, contains 3 atoms. So a healthy body contains approximately 15 to 20 milligrams of iodine. And that's around 70 to 80% is stored in the thyroid gland itself. There are other key tissues that do absorb, store, and use iodine. That includes the salivary glands in our mouths, our stomach, our breasts, ovaries as well. And iodine also supports metabolic health and weight regulation by reducing inflammation, helping to improve insulin sensitivity. So that's how we're taking glucose into our cells to use as fuel, and modulates our gut microbiome, which is all the good and bad and the whole microbiome of beneficial species as well in there, in our guts, and also protects against oxidative stress as well. In the medical world, it can be used as an antiseptic, an expectorant, I can never say that word properly, and also in contract agents for medical imaging investigations like CT scans and things like that. Now, iodine has a really good supporting role in women's health due to its anti-estrogenic effects. So it can help balance estrogen activity in the body through promoting healthy estrogen clearance from the body. So that's when we've utilised the estrogen, getting rid of the estrogen safely. And it can also help to downregulate estrogen receptors, so it can keep them working well. But also, if they're working too well and they're too sensitive, then also it can obviously make them a little bit deaf, for want of a better word. But that can help give us that balancing effect, and it also can stabilize estrogen sensitive tissues. So as you can see here, it can help in a lot of areas there, and there's some symptoms where it can help, such as fibrocystic breasts and breast pain, ovulation pain, some types of PCOS, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, and also it can help improve symptoms of endometriosis due to its anti-estrogenic effect. It's also antimicrobial and immune modulating, so that can help support the immune system as well. Now, like many nutrients, we need the right amount, as too much and too little can be problematic. And this is known as the Goldilocks principle. Not too much, not too little, everything needs to be just right. And iodine has a U-shaped curve on having either too much or too little is problematic. But the difference with iodine and other nutrients that also have a U-shaped curve is that the reference range of where it's the right range for us is a lot narrower or tighter than for other nutrients. So that's why there's a lot of issues regarding too much or too little iodine. So when we have a deficiency, i.e. there's too little coming into the thyroid and into the body, then we can also struggle with hypothyroidism, because we just don't have enough of the raw material to make thyroid hormones, so we don't make enough. And also an excess can also cause that as well, and also can cause autoimmune flares as well. Both deficiency and an excess can give us symptoms, and they can also be very similar symptoms as well. They can be fatigue, weight changes, mood changes, and also we can also get unreliable lab results as well when we've got excess coming in as well as deficiency. And also, when levels are erratic, it can prevent the thyroid from producing stable and consistent thyroid hormones. And this is more common to see when it is erratic. So more common to see when we've got an excess than when we've got a deficiency. And one of the reasons that is because we can be exposed to lots of hidden sources of iodine that we're not aware of. So how does the body and thyroid regulate how much iodine is brought into it? Well, it's largely done through TSH, that's a thyroid stimulating hormone. So there's a feedback loop. So when the brain senses that T4 or T3 levels are too low in the blood, it sends TSH to the thyroid to ask it to produce more to bring the levels up. Equally, if there's too much hormones being produced, it will decrease the level of TSH, so less is made. So it works pretty much like a central heating system, where the thermostat in the brain and the thyroid, a thermostat is the brain and the thyroid is like the boiler generating the heat. Now, additionally, TSH will increase when iodine intake falls below about 100 micrograms per day. Now, over time, this can cause more oxidative damage to the thyroid, and it can also swell in size to take in more iodine from the bloodstream. And we can see this as a visible goiter on the neck, or swelling on the neck. Now, when we're exposed to high doses of iodine, whether we're hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, so the overactive side flavour, the thyroid can shut down the sodium importer pump, so less iodine is taken up into the thyroid. and we can see thyroid hormones fall. Now, this iodine-induced hypothyroidism is known as a Wolff-Chaikoff effect and is usually transient or short-term, and normal function of the gland and hormone levels return in a couple of weeks. Now, in those with or a toxic multinodular goiter, the high dose iodine can cause iodine-induced hyperthyroidism, which is known as the Jod-Basedow effect. Okay, so how much iodine is ideal for normal thyroid production function, and hormone production? Well, you can see here that the World Health Organization depicts that as 150 micrograms a day for those aged over 12. So adults, that would be adults, and obviously children over the age of 12 is classed as an adult for this. And then obviously there's higher intakes required for pregnancy and breastfeeding of around 250 micrograms. They also determine that a deficiency is less than 100 micrograms in normal adults and less than 150 micrograms during pregnancy. Now, as you can see, there are a number of conditions and concerns when levels consistently stay below 100 micrograms, as you can see on the diagram here, as well as then with an excess when we're taking over 300 micrograms. So the UG here and MCG, just to let you know, is exactly the same. It's just a different way of writing it, but they both mean micrograms. Okay, so if we have a deficiency, it's called an iodine deficiency disorder, then you can see that there's different effects of that as we progress through our life cycle, as shown in the diagram here. It's especially important during pregnancy to get the right amount of iodine coming in for the development of the baby and the ability to carry to full term. Now, so what sort of symptoms can we see if we've got a deficiency or we're taking in too little? Well, it's very similar to the symptoms that we'll get with hypothyroidism or a sluggish thyroid. And I'm sure many of you might be familiar with these. So things like weight gain, the fatigue, hair loss, increased cholesterol levels, brain fog, dry skin, etc., etc. And the ability to tolerate higher levels of iodine, either on occasion or consistently, it largely depends on our genetics from our ancestors and whether they were adapted for coastal or inland living. So if our ancestors were coastal, then coastal genetics helps us detoxify and clear the excess of iodine far better so we can tolerate a higher level. So think of the Japanese who eat a lot of seaweed products like sushi and things like that. Now, those who have inland genetics are better at storing and concentrating it because access to it was obviously less frequent. So we are less able to tolerate higher levels. But as we've seen with everything with iodine, there is a sweet spot, and beyond that, it can cause issues. So, for example, the Japanese have a higher tolerance to the high levels, but they also have the highest incidence of thyroid disease globally. And Hashimoto's, the underactive autoimmune thyroid condition, was discovered and named by a Japanese doctor after seeing it in the Japanese population. Now, what's the effects of too much iodine? And as we saw earlier, we store thyroid hormones in thyroglobulin in the thyroid. And this is a way of storing iodine too. But when there's more iodine ingested than can be stored, the excess iodine can cause damage to the thyroid while it waits to be made into thyroid hormones. This damage encourages the immune system in the thyroid to come into it, and where it can a certain branch of the immune system can attack thyroglobulin and thyroid peroxidase, which is the enzyme that bolts the iodine onto thyroglobulin to form the hormones. And then we can see Hashimoto's and Graves'-like responses. We can also see increased TSH levels, which can ultimately lead to a goiter, and there's hypothyroidism as well. There's some common symptoms of too much iodine intake, can be things like metallic taste in the mouth, burning sensation in the mouth and throat, sore gums, excess sneezing, increased salivation, and energy crashes. And there are also common symptoms, apart from maybe sneezing and increased salivation, for a number of other conditions too. So they're not necessarily diagnostic. And when we consider our overall iodine intake, it's best to look at diet, any fortified iodine foods such as iodine salt, which is less common in the UK, personal care products, especially those from the USA and Americas, as iodine hasn't been banned as an ingredient in those products over there, and as well as any medications and supplements you're taking. And I think there's a bit of caution as well with excess iodine is because if you've got a compromised renal function, i.e. your kidneys aren't working as well, then they can be more easily damaged, and as well as other organs can be more easily damaged because the clearance of excess iodine out of the body is impaired. And also some medical procedures use iodinated contrast agents such as CT scans and MRI scans, and they can contain large amounts, and that can also have a noxious effect on the gut microbiomes as well. So where do we get our iodine from? Well, here's quite a short food list, and there's a more comprehensive list with average iodine amounts per food on Thyroid UK's website or the British Dietetic Association's website as well. Just want to mention about sea salt, about seaweeds. It's always best to avoid kelp. That's a brown seaweed, as it's got a very high and variable iodine content. So you don't know exactly how much you're going to get when you take a kelp supplement or you're taking kelp powders and things like that. It's far better if you do like your seaweed to use nori, which is a red seaweed, and that's that normally found in sushi rolls, as it has got a lower iodine content. And about 1 to 2 sheets a couple of times a week is probably about enough on the seaweed side of it. Also, I just wanted to mention about salts as well. We talked earlier about iodized salt. So sea salt, pink Himalayan salt, regular table salt, and most electrolyte supplements in the UK have got very low amounts of iodine or none at all. And mostly pink Himalayan sea salt doesn't have any. Salt sold in the UK is not required to be fortified with iodine, and it will, but it is in other countries. So if you're going abroad, you might want to just consider that as well. Now, if it's fortified, it will say iodized on the label. Now, there are a couple of UK brands in the UK that do sell iodized salt, and you'll see that clearly labelled. And that's Saxa, Cerebros, Tata, and La Baleine, which is a French one. Now, just watch though, because iodized salt is quite high in iodine. Just half a teaspoon will give you the recommended daily amount of 150 micrograms. Some medications also contain iodine. Now, thyroid medications such as T4 only, T3 and T4/T4 combo medications, they don't contain iodine as an individual nutrient, i.e. a free source. So you're not getting a free source of iodine that you can utilize straight away. Instead, the iodine is bound into the hormones. So when you take the hormone, it's already preformed, and obviously it's got iodine already in it. And in the body, the bound iodine can be broken down from those hormones and recycled to make more thyroid hormones by your own thyroid, or can support other cellular functions and tissues who use it. Now, it's estimated that 100 micrograms of levothyroxine, which is T4 only, provides roughly 40 to 50 micrograms of total iodine. Now, to work out how much iodine you're likely getting from your T4 only thyroid medication, you can multiply your dose for around 40 to 50%. So, for example, if you're taking 75 micrograms, you're likely getting around 30 to 37.5 micrograms of iodine with each dose. Now, the amount of iodine found in T3 only thyroid medications is going to be slightly less than that, because T3 contains 25% fewer iodine atoms than T4, because it only contains 3 iodine atoms. Now, the percentage calculation sort of takes into account the atomic weight of iodine in T4 for thyroid hormones, the average absorption of thyroid medication, the recycling of iodine, and the excretion of iodine from bile. Now, if you've got taking NDT medications, they are going to contain both free and bound iodine forms. The free iodine is coming from any that was in, obviously when the animal was died, and so that's available and free, and also bound iodine in the form of the thyroid hormones. So the amount that's estimated, and again it's only an estimate, in 1 grain is estimated to be around 130 micrograms of total iodine. That's the free and the bound. So even though thyroid medications do contain iodine, based on the average dose that most people take, they don't contain enough to cause issues for most thyroid patients. Now, here's a quick list of other prescribed medications that contain iodine. And if you are concerned, speak to your pharmacist to see if there is an alternative that's safe for you. Just wanted to explain what an intravenous pyelogram or an IVP is. It's a radiological procedure that used to visualize abnormalities in the urinary system, including kidneys, ureters, and bladders, just in case you didn't know that one. Okay, here is a list of hidden iodine sources found in food, supplements, and personal care products. Now, they're quite sneaky, they can be in lots of them. And one thing to note, also, I didn't say earlier, is Irish moss and kelp. Well, we mentioned kelp, but Irish moss as well is very high in iodine, and again, inconsistent levels again. So it's probably best to avoid anything with Irish moss or kelp on the label. Now, this list is American. It's sourced off Dr. Christiansen. He's quite a big thyroid functional medicine doctor. I think he's a chiropractor in America. But it just gives you an idea of how many hidden sources there can be. So just watch your overall consumption. Okay, iodine absorption. So how do we absorb iodine? Well, we talked earlier about how it gets into the thyroid, but obviously when we're looking at taking supplements and we're looking at putting things on our skin, like personal care products, there's different ways that we will ingest that. So food, medications and supplements that we take orally through the mouth are screened by the liver first before they enter our bloodstream, which is known as a first pass effect. And we generally absorb less of those products as a result. But if you, from topical products that are absorbed through the skin or a scalp or mucous membranes directly into the bloodstream, and therefore they bypass the liver's first pass of screening. So we generally absorb more. So we talked about the different types of things earlier about high doses, but I think just watch out for some personal care products that contain iodine. I'm not sure I can actually pronounce that, polyvinyl pyridone or something, or PVP and its derivatives, and that's used as in lotions and creams. It's a stabilizer to prevent ingredient separation, and that can contain as much as 12% iodine, and we can absorb around 4% of that, so that's quite high. So just have a good look at some of the ingredients lists on some of your personal care products and cosmetics and things. So what blocks iodine? So goitrogens, you've probably heard of those, that they can block iodine uptake into the thyroid. So there are different types of goitrogens, and what a goitrogen is any substance that interferes with the iodine's uptake into the thyroid, resulting in lower thyroid hormone production, and especially in those who are deficient in iodine to start with. So what happens, as we've seen earlier, that TSH will then increase, which stimulates the growth of the thyroid gland and eventually can lead to goiter, hence the name of goitrogens. So there are some goitrogenic foods. I've listed a few of those there. One of them is cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, cauliflower, cassavas and things like that. Now, these are generally not found to cause goiter, and they don't significantly hamper thyroid hormones unless you're eating extremely, and I underline the word extremely, large quantities of them in a raw form on a consistent basis. Now, I doubt many of us are eating platefuls and platefuls of raw broccoli on the daily, so that's okay. And what they do increase is the beneficial antioxidant glutathione, which we'll talk about a bit later, and how that mops up inflammation in the thyroid. So it's not an excuse to avoid cruciferous vegetables. They have got fantastic nutrients and also some key things in them called sulforaphane, which helps with estrogen balance in the body as well. Now, chemical goitrogens, they do disrupt the thyroid function and can be very potent, especially perchlorates, which can be found in water supplies and also in cow's milk as well. And they can be up to 300 times more potent than the nitrates you might find added to like ham and deli products. Probably the ones you come most in contact with on a daily basis can be halogens. Now, halogens share a similar chemical structure to iodine and can be taken up into the thyroid by the same sodium pump we mentioned earlier as iodine. And therefore they can be stored in place of iodine as well, effectively displacing iodine of thyroid hormones. But the thyroid can't use them to make thyroid hormones, so they can go up into the thyroid, they can be stored in the thyroid, and obviously they will competitively compete with iodine to be taken into the thyroid, but they're not incorporated into thyroid hormones. They're just displacing the uptake of thyroid hormones. But as we've seen, when less iodine is taken up, we'll make less hormones, and obviously that can lead to subclinical or hypothyroidism. Fluoride is added to drinking water in large parts of the UK to promote dental health, but recent research shows it doesn't reduce the risk of cavities in adults at any significant level. And it's also an endocrine disruptor, meaning it can negatively affect thyroid function and other hormone-producing glands. A study in the United States in 2024 reported that the rates of hypothyroidism in areas that added fluoride to their water were twice as high compared to areas that didn't. And it's also found in toothpaste, mouthwash, some red and black teas, processed beverages, and some medications. Chlorine, like fluoride, is added to drinking water, but as a disinfectant and is used in swimming pools. And it's also a key component of bleach. Bromine, Watcher's potassium bromate, can be used as an additive in foods such as baked goods and flours and some citrus-flavoured drinks in America. It's banned in food for food use in the UK, Europe and Canada, but it is used as a sanitizer in hot tubs where high temperatures can make chlorine less effective. So if you've got a hot tub and you put those little tablets in as disinfectant, it's mostly got bromine in it. One of the reasons it's less smelly than chlorine, kinder to skin and eyes. And it's also used as a flame retardant in furniture and upholstery as well. Okay, so I said I'd talk about a little bit more about breastfeeding and pregnancy. So the RDA for iodine during pregnancy and breastfeeding is higher at 250 micrograms daily. And higher iodine levels are critical for the brain development throughout pregnancy and to ensure the breast milk contains enough to support continuing brain development. That's why it's also in multivitamins for pregnancy as well and for breastfeeding. What we also want to focus on is during the T1, which is trimester 1 of pregnancy, the fetus is solely reliant on our maternal thyroid hormones before its own thyroid takes over around in trimester 2 and when it can actually absorb iodine and make its own hormones. So that's really key. Also, TSH needs to be optimized if you're trying to conceive and to support carrying to full term. Then, if you've got autoimmune conditions, especially Hashimoto's, if you've got a thyroid autoimmune condition, especially Hashimoto's, it's important to get your TSH below the pregnancy range of around 2.5 if you're trying to conceive and maintain the pregnancy reference range throughout the trimester as well. And the issue is because that you might think, oh, hang on a minute, if I'm pregnant or I'm trying to conceive or breastfeeding, why do I need more iodine? Well, we've already said it, obviously it's critical for brain development, but during pregnancy, our immune system is naturally suppressed because obviously we're growing a baby. So we don't obviously want the immune system obviously to abort the pregnancy, and thyroid antibodies as a result are generally reduced, so we can tolerate higher levels, and the needed higher levels can be tolerated there as well. Postpartum though, antibodies can come back and can rise as the immune system is no longer suppressed, and we can see a resurgence of pre-existing autoimmune conditions. We can see hypothyroidism, and we also can see an increase of developing postpartum thyroiditis as well, which is got its own issues. So it's crucial to work on lowering your antibodies and getting your TSH into range before pregnancy. Another one, thyroid autoimmunity. So it is a very complex process, and it's also quite nuanced as well. So there's no hard and fast rules. Autoimmunity obviously is down to your genetics, environment, your age, all those bits and pieces, and especially our gender as well, can have an effect. But the intake of iodine into the thyroid via the sodium pump and production of thyroid hormones creates oxidative damage and inflammation in the thyroid. That happens for everybody, whether you've got autoimmune condition or not. So think of that oxidative damage inflammation as little fires. And now along comes the master antioxidant in the body, and we actually make it in the thyroid as well, called glutathione. And that actually mops it up. So think of glutathione like a fire extinguisher. So in order to make glutathione, we need adequate selenium. Okay, now the RDA of iodine, even in Hashimoto's and Graves, is not likely to cause issues for most people if we have adequate selenium, according to another functional medicine doctor in the States called Dr. Weston Childs. So that's really good news. And the fact that if you've got adequate selenium intake and you're just taking the RDA, so you're not into an excess situation, then actually iodine is not something to be feared when you have Hashimoto's or Graves' autoimmune condition. Now, damage to the thyroid gland from an excess iodine dosing occurs if we're also, like I said, low in selenium, and that occurs for all conditions as well as those with autoimmune. So if you're not got enough selenium, then you might struggle. And if you're iodine deficient to start with, and then you're putting a high dose of iodine, then you will have more problems. So the greater the deficiency of iodine, the higher the likelihood of developing autoimmune conditions in susceptible individuals. And susceptible could be, like I said earlier, certain genetics, certain other autoimmune conditions you may have as well might lead you to develop a thyroid autoimmune condition. So those with Graves and those with nodular autonomy, so it's the nodules that are working autonomously from the instruction from the brain, which is TSH, may see hypothyroid symptoms worsen with excessive iodine doses. The reason being you're adding fuel to the hormone production fire, and the normal TSH feedback loop that lowers the production, as I said, isn't working properly. So in Graves, TSH receptors are stimulated by the immune system. Those antibodies are TRAb or TSI antibodies. And in hot nodules, which obviously are overproducing thyroid hormones, they are working independently of the TSH's instruction. So I think the good thing to know here is that if you are keeping to the RDAs of iodine and you are having good sources of selenium and you are not deficient in iodine, then you're going to be, it's quite okay to not to be afraid of using iodine. And we, like I said, we use iodine for the thyroid hormones, but we also use it for lots of other areas in the body. So it's not something to shy away from completely, and it's not something that you want to avoid completely either. So if you are at all concerned about what your iodine levels are, there are various testing options for you. Now, the skin patch test traditionally involved applying iodine lotion to the skin and observing how quickly it disappears. The test is often can claim to indicate iodine deficiency, but it is not scientifically valid. The fading of iodine off the skin is influenced by several factors. So evaporation increases with temperature. As temperature increases, the rate of evaporation will increase, and also evaporation increases in decreased air pressure. When iodine is converted to usable iodide form, the yellow colour of iodine will disappear as iodine is white or colourless. So you're not necessarily taking it in there. Skin absorption, environmental conditions obviously can change and therefore can affect it. And we know about 88% of iodine evaporates off the skin with only about 12% penetrating. So again, that's why the method can be unreliable for assessing iodine status. Now, there are different tests, and they are urinary iodine, and it's considered more useful than blood testing as iodine is excreted through the urine. And it's also, iodine testing is considered good for population levels, but less accurate for assessing individual status. But it's the best option that we've got at the current moment. So there are a couple of tests. There's a 24-hour loading test, which you take in a large dose of iodine, you collect all the urine that you excrete over a 24-hour period. And about 90% of all nutritional doses of iodine are excreted in the urine, but not necessarily within the first 24 hours. So you might not get the best result out of that. It is not suitable if you're taking thyroid medications, or for children, or for those with active thyroiditis, that's inflammation of the thyroid gland, high thyroglobulin antibodies, Graves, or thyroid nodules. So there's another test called the random urine iodine, or the spot tests, and that basically reflects iodine intake over the previous 24 to 48 hours, and you can use this if you're on thyroid medication. It's done in the morning as the lowest levels and in fasted state, using the first morning's urine void, or first morning void, as the peak iodine levels occur 4 to 5 hours after ingestion and can remain elevated for up to 24 hours. So we want to make sure that we avoid that, so it gives you a better, you just take it first in the morning. And you don't need to change your diet, so you can maintain a normal diet for 3 days prior to that. Okay, so hopefully that helps there. But what I would say about your urinary testing is you must be corrected against creatinine levels. So as you can see here, There's two beakers. They both contain roughly the same amount of dots to represent your iodine. And which sample contains more dots? Well, you probably might think, oh, it's a smaller beaker because, you can see more of them, but that's not the right answer. So when we're dehydrated, which the beaker with a small amount of water represents, it will appear to have a higher iodine level as the urine is more concentrated. So to avoid misleading results, we must ensure that the results are reported alongside corrected creatinine levels. And most labs do this for you. And I've just given you an example result here. This is what you may see if you did an iodine result, iodine test, and it will say results, and you can see it has been corrected for creatinine. Okay. So here's a few action steps for you to help you reduce excess iodine. And first, let's start with goitrogens, chemical goitrogens. So you can opt for fluoride-free toothpaste, mouthwash, and filter your tap water. And you can actually also buy filters that go in shower heads as well if you want to. Speak to your pharmacist if you're concerned of any medications may contain fluoride for safer alternatives. You could make sure you shower after having or being in chlorinated pools. You can use specific brands of personal care products that can remove chlorine from the skin and hair. Swim is one of them. You can use glass or ceramic to store and heat your foods instead of plastics. Plastics contain chlorine in the PVCs, and other EDCs stand for endocrine disrupting chemicals, so they affect our hormones, and these can leach into foods and drinks when plastics are heated. Ensure you ventilate rooms well when you get new furniture to help get rid of the chemical off-gassing. As I said, bromide is often used in them. And try and use natural cosmetic, personal care and household cleaning products where possible as well. Regarding the diet, as I said, try to keep the total daily dietary and supplemental iodine, which you might get in multivitamins, for example, to around the 150 micrograms per. Sometimes you may have a bit more, which will be fine. If you're taking a multivitamin that's got 150 micrograms in it, and you've got your levothyroxine that's got a little bit that can obviously be broken down and used, and you're having some fish, for example, you may go up. Now, the thyroid it can cope with that. It's got mechanisms to make sure it can cope with that. And the same, obviously, when if you're pregnant and breastfeeding as well, keeping to the recommended daily amounts there. But it's when the issue is, like I said earlier, it's when you're consistently taking really high doses, and that will be anything over 300 micrograms on a consistent daily basis, that problems can rise. And again, like I said, avoid thyroid supplements that contain kelp, Irish moss, bladder wrack, seaweeds, and high dose iodine. Again, anything over 300 micrograms. And if you are concerned, test, don't guess. Especially if you're vegan and vegetarian, or you might suspect you might be iodine deficient as you're not consuming iodine-rich foods on a regular basis. So that's it from me. You'll be pleased to know. Thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you found the session useful. Before we just dive into a couple of questions, I've got a couple of gifts for you. The first is a 7-day thyroid-friendly meal plan that you can download for free using the link or the QR code. And the second is an exclusive £100 discount off my next Thyroid Kickstart group programme, which starts in June. You can join the wait list to ensure you get the discount. Again, use the link or to scan. Okay, that's me done. Thank you, Lynn. Have you got any questions?
Well, thank you so much. I've learned a few bits from that. Iodine has always been something that's been a bit tricky for people and for me, trying to explain why we shouldn't have too much, try not to get it in your supplements and things. And also the testing has been difficult. I know some of the labs we work with do the loading test, but I don't know about the last test that you had on there, so I might need to have a look into that.
Yes, you could get that from Regenerous can do.
Oh, can you?
Do that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you can do that. It's about, I think they put the test prices up now, so it's about it might actually be about £90 now to do a spot test. But if you're looking for peace of mind, or you are concerned, or you're working with a practitioner, then obviously the testing is available.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Another couple of points. I always wondered why I felt better when I was pregnant. couldn't understand it. But now, yeah, I didn't realise that. I should have done, but I don't know if other people have found it the same. I would imagine they have done. When you talk about endocrine disruptors, it's really interesting because I was approached by a gentleman that I know quite well, and he told me about an article in the Times about endocrine disruption and hypothyroidism. I haven't read it yet. I've printed it off ready, but we do know that there are quite a few endocrine disrupting chemicals that affect the thyroid, but not a lot is done about it at the moment. And I was just thinking it might be something that, you know, when you get the survey for the JLA, for the research questions, it might be something that you could put in if you sort of have a look at it, look into it a bit more. And I think that's it for me. So the first one is I have been prescribed omeprazole. I think that's right. Is that what you mean? Omeprazole?
Yeah, that's omeprazole. Yeah.
Which needs to be taken half an hour before breakfast. Yes, this cancels out thyroxine. If I take my thyroxine first, how long after this can I take omeprazole? I think I can answer that one, actually. I think you're meant to leave it 4 hours, is it? Or less than that, Caroline, would you suggest?
Between taking medications, ideally it's an hour for levothyroxine, so not to have anything that can reduce the absorption of levothyroxine. The reason why we take it on an empty stomach, ideally take it on an empty stomach, we should be taking it on an empty stomach, is to make sure that the acid that we have is enough to really support breaking it down and so we can absorb it properly. Obviously, remember, I can never say that word either. It's a PPI, so it's a protein pump inhibitor to reduce the amount of acid that's available in the stomach. I think it's probably worth having a chat with your GP. Obviously, I can't advise you, I can only advise you from a guideline perspective, but you would normally have your levothyroxine first and then wait an hour, and then you might take your omeprazole, and then wait, and like you said, wait half an hour after that before you'd actually eat. And obviously that way around, you're managing your stomach acid level, but you're also giving your body the best way of absorbing your levothyroxine first thing in the morning. But if you are concerned, then speak to your GP for any further advice. But I would probably say the best option is first in the morning, levothyroxine as normal. Wait the required amount of time, which can be an hour or can be 2 hours or more, depending on medication. And then obviously wait half an hour, like you say, before you then have your breakfast.
I know that a lot of people actually, when they're on those kind of meds, they take their levothyroxine at bedtime. And they find that it works for them because as long as you make sure, I think you have to leave 3 or 4 hours after your main meal in the evening, because your main meal is quite big and it might take a while to digest. So you might, if it's a bit of a hassle every morning, it might be better to try doing it at bedtime like other people. But sorry, I can't hear you very well. I think can leave be taken before bed, say 6 hours after dinner. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people do. They take it at bedtime because there's been a big gap between their evening meal and going to bed, as long as they don't sort of eat between that time, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Lynn, that's a good one as well, because as long as you like the 3 to 4 hours window after you've eaten something before you take levothyroxine, is to make sure that the stomach has finished digestion, so all of that contents from that last evening meal have been removed out of the stomach, it's been emptied, and then obviously there's nothing else in that stomach to reduce the absorption of levothyroxine.
So her second question was, in hospital I was given all my meds at one time. Has anyone any experience of persuading the nurses to give thyroxine when they wake you up at 2 a.m. to take your blood pressure? I've not heard of that before.
No,
I don't know if anyone else has. I think the answer to that is no. What else? Another question. When I moved from Milton Keynes, ICB, where I was on 175 micrograms a day, to Northampton ICB, I have been downgraded to 100. I have repeatedly asked for my reverse T3 to be checked, but all I got was a 2-line response from the local endocrinologist about D10. Do you mean DIO2? Which my GP, which my GP didn't explain. No real explanation, as far as I'm concerned, about how this refers to T3, reverse T3. I will say that the NHS don't do a reverse T3 test. If you wanted that test, you would have to pay for it yourself because it's expensive and it has to go to America. You can purchase it from, I think it's Genova. I think it's an add-on for Genova, but it has to go to America. I don't know why you've been downgraded. It wouldn't have been the ICB. It would have been your GP probably. Usually they downgrade you because your TSH is too low. But the British Thyroid Association say that patients can go down to the very bottom of the TSH range before asking for a trial of liothyronine. It does state it in their guidance. I don't think it's on our website, but if anybody wants to see the guidance, if you send Nikki an email asking for the BTA liothyronine guidance, then I'm sure she'll send you a copy. Just an observation, this is Maureen, just an observation. Many English water authorities have want to add fluoride to their water supply. Scotland and I think Denmark have banned this practice. I do not understand why, given the research that councils insist on continuing this practice. Neither do we. I mean, in the old days here, I did some campaigning about fluoride in water. But I think there is an organisation, I think in the Midlands, that are campaigning on that. So perhaps you need to see if you can do a search. I can't remember their name at the moment. It's just, I don't know, because I don't think it's helping anybody's teeth. So it's unbelievable that they're still trying to do that. I was told, but I don't know if this is true, that they need to get rid of some of the byproducts of something, and that's why it's being, so they're trying to get rid of it that way. I don't know how true that is, but and Jake, is that Jackie has said only Midlands and North East have fluoride added to water. AFAIK. I'm not sure what that means. Jackie, are you able to?
As far as I know.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, I'm too old. Things like that. Anglian water doesn't add fluoride, and I'm within Anglian water, and they definitely don't, because I looked into it a few years back. To my knowledge, Northumberland has fluoride in the water supply, unless someone knows anything different. I don't know. I've sort of gone more into liothyronine campaign than fluoride, I'm afraid. If I, this is an interesting one, Caroline. If iodine testing is unreliable, how did they come up with an RDA for it? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think the issues with iodine RDA and specifically iodine testing, so urinary iodine testing, is it's great for population. So when you look at a big data set, you can see the patterns and you can see obviously where things are best fitting. And that's obviously where they'll come with the amounts for urinary testing, where that should fall. It's not as easy to look at it from an individual point of view, but the best we've got of that is looking at the urine, is looking at the levels that are corrected against iodine. The actual RDAs for iodine intake into the body, where do they come from? Well, they're the WHO, so World Health Organization, and various other government and health bodies around the world, they will state that based on their population, or the general population, if you're looking at the WHO, for example, and it's them who've come up with it. So there's two types of things. There's one, there's nutrient intake, RDA, recommended daily amount of nutrient of iodine intake, and that's set around 150 or 250 if you're over pregnancy and breastfeeding. And then there's iodine testing to see what your individual levels are, and that's literally sits. The ideal for those are to sit within the reference range. So when you're given the test results, there's a reference range, and ideally being in the middle or the mean of that is probably the best place to be for you as an individual, as long as it's corrected against iodine, corrected against creatinine. That was it. But regarding the RDAs, as in the actual amounts and where you should be for your iodine, I am not sure. I think it's pretty much lab decisions based on, like, a lot of lab test results are based on the people who use the lab. They then look at the average population and decide what most people are falling into, almost, or what, as a, and instead of a U-shaped curve as we saw earlier, it's more of a bell-shaped curve, and it's in that middle of that bell at the top of the peak. They'll draw two lines straight down and say that is a normal #normal reference range where most people are likely to fall into, and that's obviously where they've done that for the iodine testing.
That's the problem with ranges. Some ranges, I mean, I was told that for finding a lot of the ranges, they actually just choose 100 people from around that area, or work people, and they do it that way. But some ranges, like the B12 range, is massive. It's something like 200 to 700, and it was 900 in some places. And anywhere in there, you could be normal. I just think it's amazing. You can't, if you've got symptoms of B12 deficiency, you need treatment. And you can't say, well, you've got 210, you're just within the range, you're fine. You can't. I get that all the time from people. My doctor has said that I'm fine because I'm within the range, and they're way down the bottom and have symptoms. It's just sometimes.
Yeah, and that's when you're looking at it through a different lens, a more tighter range lens, like what we call the optimum or functional lens, is far better, because that's where we're trying to compare you and your result directly against healthy people, rather than comparing you against someone or people who they've chosen against those people, because those people using the lab aren't necessarily going to be the healthiest people, because they're trying to understand what's wrong with them, or have I got a condition, or have I got symptoms, and what does that mean, for example. So it's always better to look at the functional or optimum range and see whether or not you're moving into those issues. And also that's quite preventative as well, because if you, for example, with B12, such a big range, but if you're right down at the bottom of that range and you've still got the tag of normal, but you've got the symptoms, well, that's no good. You want to prevent you from getting worse. And the same if you're at the top of that range, you want to prevent falling into a diseased state, which would mean falling out of that normal range. So it's far better to look at a narrower range and be compared against healthy people and try and move you towards that, rather than be compared against sicker people, which is not great.
How CNA1 reduce the TPO antibodies? I don't understand that. Shaylin, can you explain what you mean?
I think she might mean, I'm sorry, I'm assuming it's a lady, sorry. It might be can, but spelt wrong. So how can one reduce TPO?
Oh, right, okay. Well,
that's
often.
Yeah,
levothyroxine often reduces it, doesn't it? Once you're on levo, they often reduce, but I found in some people they don't stay reduced. In times of stress, it sets it all off again. What do you think, Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, levothyroxine is great for placing the hormone that your thyroid, the amount of hormone that your thyroid can't make anymore, for whatever the reason may be. But it doesn't directly affect the antibodies, because the antibodies are being driven by the immune system, not by a lack of thyroid hormone. So in order to affect and reduce antibodies, you have to go and look at the immune system, and because at the moment, if you've got raised antibodies, it is saying it's more, it can damage. So certain branches of the immune system have flags, and certain branches of the immune system actually do the damage. Think of it like a SEAL team or a special forces team. So an antibody doesn't damage the thyroid directly. What it does is puts a little flag up to a different branch, the SEAL team of the immune system, and says, come on in, please, and deal with whatever the situation is. So in order to reduce that, you need to reduce the antibodies, and that flag that's been there is to address the immune system. So that's how you can address the TPO level and bring that down.
Is that something to do with the microbiome, Caroline? Is that...
There's lots of issues. Stress is a big one. Microbiome health, absolutely. You've got your adrenal health as well linked to the stress. And it's very individual. There isn't one supplement you can take, for example, that would address it. It's about improving your overall health. And then obviously, like I said, really supporting that immune system. And it's called immune modulation. So it's actually getting that immune system to calm down. So it's in an overactive state when it's creating more antibodies against something. So it's getting it to calm down and to be quiet a little bit, quieten down a little bit.
My next question is from Mary. I recently had my ovaries removed and a lot of, I think, CT scans, one of which involved a dye. Could that have caused worsened symptoms with my Hashimoto's?
I think it could have contributed. I wouldn't say it was a direct cause. Like I said in the presentation, high doses of iodine containing contrast agents that are used in the scans, then obviously, yes, they can over time cause problems because, again, it's a high dose. So it depends what your iodine level was beforehand. So if you were a little bit deficient, then it can cause more problems because you're just dumping a huge big load in there. It also depends whether or not you were selenium efficient or sufficient. Selenium levels were, again, as we said, that helps make glutathione, which mops up any excess iodine damage that's caused by excess iodine. So, if you were struggling with those two things, for example, then that potentially can and could have made your symptoms worse, or contributed to making your symptoms worse.
Thank you. The next one is from Claire. I was going to tell Lynn how genetic testing showed I have genetic problem with converting T4 to T3. So that will probably be the DIO2 gene, which can not help with conversion. And that's why some people need T3. So hopefully you'll get some T3 if you haven't already. Susan says, can low or high iodine affect inflammation and fluid retention by the body? Caroline, don't know that one.
Good question. Not sure about fluid retention, to be honest. It definitely can affect inflammation, as we've seen in the thyroid. Too much iodine can affect it. And again, if we've got not enough iodine, then TSH will go up, and TSH causes more inflammation in the thyroid because it's more stimulation of the thyroid to work harder. And again, the thyroid can grow. So TSH can cause the thyroid to swell, so it can take in more iodine. So in both states can affect inflammation levels, definitely. The fluid retention, I'm not sure. I can certainly find out. It's not something I've ever come across, but yeah. But again, with fluid retention, it is going to be more about your kidneys and their management of fluid. And there is something, I think it's called RAS, RAAS, Rangio, and not, I can't pronounce these things, but there is supposed to be about that. And there is a link with thyroid hormone levels and that mechanism, but not directly iodine, but obviously indirectly iodine, yes, because obviously if you've not got enough iodine, you're not going to make enough thyroid hormone, etc. So, but I'm not aware of a direct link with iodine and fluid retention.
Okay, thank you. Doina has said, hi Claire, would you please tell us what genetic tests? I'm assuming, Claire, that it was the DIO2. Can you confirm that if you're still here?
It probably is. There is a company that do genetic testing, nutrigenomic testing it's called, which looks at if you have any errors on the process of converting T4 into T3, and also converting, if you've got issues with converting T4 into reverse T3. as well as looking at you've got problems with the brain, communicating with the thyroid, etc. And you've also got problems transporting thyroid hormone around the body, as well as looking as if you've got problems you might have on getting T3 into the cells as well. That company is called LifeCode GX, and you do those testing. It is only available through practitioners though. But you can do a thyroid panel test. I'm trying to think what the prices. They're normally, I think they just put the prices up, so these are the old prices, but it's about £150 a report. And then you buy also a cheek swab test, so you get the DNA, and that's about £100 as well. But they keep the DNA from the cheek swab for about 3 to 6 months. So if you did want to do other testing, like methylation, detoxification, neurotransmitters, etc., and hormones they do as well, then you don't have to pay another £100 if you want to do another testing report. You still have to pay for the report, but yeah. So that's something that can be considered as well. Yeah.
Okay. Claire's come back actually, said she got it from Blue Horizon and then visited a specialist who confirmed that she's not converting very well. So
yeah.
Okay. Urinary iodine test. Where can this be obtained? One of the testing companies that we work with, I think actually two, I think Regeneris and Genova do a urinary iodine test, but I don't know about the spot test. I need to look at that.
Yeah, the spot test is at Regeneris as well.
DNA blue test with Blue Horizon Laboratories. Also Genova, I don't know if Genova do it. Regeneris do a DNA panel. I think that's about £100, but I might be wrong. My question is from Madeline. Why is she prescribed a PPI? If it's because of acid reflux, I've been told too much stomach acid. The problem could be too little stomach acid, not closing the sphincter at the top of the stomach, bottom of the esophagus. I've sorted this, much to my horror, and then surprise of my GP by taking a cheap wide-spectrum digestive enzyme, and I've also lost my continual mild sore throat. That's interesting. I mean, I did know that it can be caused by both, especially in hypothyroidism. Any experience with ICB's blacklisting NDT? NDT and ICBs, I don't know of any that would allow NDT. We're pushing to get liothyronine, although on the NHS guidance, it does state liothyronine, including NDT, I think. But, you know, I think that would be another big campaign, and we just don't have the resources either in staff or funding. So, Doina, I've looked up the test results on my computer screen. It's called Thyroid Genetic Panel. I don't know what that's for. Could request medication to be staggered. If hospital nurses or doctors say no, maybe get your GP to contact the hospital if you feel strongly about this for how you want medicine. Could also possibly speak to the pharmacist who goes round the wards, not the general pharmacy, shop pharmacy, too, for medicine advice guidance for you and those looking after you in hospital. Don't be afraid to ask. It's very difficult. The nurses are so busy, aren't they? Linda, following my last COVID jab in October 22, I developed lung infections leading to asthma. My asthma consultant prescribed a steroid inhaler a year ago, which, apart from other side effects, left me with a sore throat, but no cause. Neither my GP nor my dentist could see anything. The sore throat gets worse when I lie down, so my consultant prescribed omeprazole in case there was a reflux issue. It is helping slightly, but I'm concerned about possibly having to take this long term. I'm being referred to ENT for an endoscopic investigation. I hope this will find a reason for the soreness as it affects how I take my whiskey. Dear. Best of luck with that then. Maureen says, thanks to all at Thyroid UK and Caroline for her most interesting lecture. Has Caroline any advice on how to reduce inflammation? I feel I have a lot of fluid retention. I have gained several stones over the past few years and can't seem to shift it through diet. Should I step up exercise? Would water retention medication be useful? My weight is making me very achy every day, so a vicious cycle. It was sad. don't know if you can answer that one, Caroline. Any advice on how
Yeah,
to
without
reduce inflammation?
Yeah, I mean, inflammation, it depends where it is across the body, and what's driving it at the end of the day. It's hard without knowing your full health history, to give you specific advice. I think the main thing is water retention medication might not be the solution. And it might, you know, it depends where the inflammation is. If you can identify if it's all over with water retention, or I'm really trying to find out what's driving that. I can't give you specific advice regarding it, unfortunately, because I don't know your personal medical history. I'll try and say, well, that could be what's possibly driving the inflammation, and therefore you would want to try and minimize that, as that could be triggering in the inflammation. Therefore, you work on that. But you can always, if you, I don't start with you, Lynn, but you can always reach out to me, and my contact details are on that final sheet. Final slide. So and we can talk further. I do a free discovery call, so we could obviously talk a bit more detail and give you advice.
Madeline has asked, what was the name of the company? LicoGX, did you say, Caroline?
It's Life Code GX. So life and the word code together, GX, and I think it's .com or .co.uk. And you can see on there, there'll be a full list of all the reports. That they call it reports, but it's what test results that they would run.
Okay, this one I don't understand, but you might, Caroline. Can medication for underactive thyroid or underactive thyroid itself cause the side effect of adipsia? I don't know what that is. Do you?
No,
I feel I've had
sorry.
this for a while. No, I don't know what that is. By
Unless
the way,
it's lack of thirst. Because the lady is talking about if you don't seem to have thirst, or drink much fluids. And no, she hasn't hardly consumed any fluids, not diabetic, and micrograms of levothyroxine. I don't know your age, so the first thing is, as we do get older, unfortunately, we lose the ability to feel thirsty. So that could be a contributing factor. I'm not sure that levothyroxine would, an underactive thyroid would be a direct cause. It could definitely be a contributing cause. So because you're not getting enough thyroid hormone into the body, or hopefully you are now with taking a replacement thyroid hormone, but generally in hypothyroid people, every process in the body is slowed down because we just don't get enough of hormone through that tells each cell how to work properly and what level to work at. So in other words, get enough in, the cell will work at 100%. If you don't get enough in, it's going to work less than that, and therefore that's why you've got the symptoms. So that is definitely could have a triggering effect. So you might want to have a look at your labs, maybe run some thyroid labs, and just have a look at your TSH, your T4, and in particular your T3, to see if you can firstly are converted enough, and then obviously see whether that could be a driver, because it might be that your 50 micrograms might not be enough, or you might be able to improve the conversion of that T4 levothyroxine you're taking into T3, so you can actually get more converted. You'll have more of it, and then you can get more into the cell, which obviously can mitigate issues like that.
So Linda has said long-time omeprazole will lower your B12. I refused any mRNA genetic therapy jabs after my second, which gave me swelling in the armpit. It was then I started researching these things. Many thanks to Lynn and Caroline for all your hard work and the most interesting webinar. I look forward to rewatching it. And then Debbie has said, perhaps go to the Women's Health Initiative through the government, might be able to help our T3 campaign. I'll have a look at that. I'm trying to think if I did before. We did put in a report to the Women's Health Strategy that is actually showing something on TV at the moment, but they didn't include thyroid in it. So, okay, I think that's all of them now. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and a special thanks to Caroline. That was really interesting, and for answering people's questions. So thank you very
You're
much, and I look forward
welcome.
to seeing you. Hopefully our next webinar will be the International Thyroid Awareness Week webinar, which will be on the 28th of May. I'm just organising it now. We've got some good speakers, including Caroline. Caroline's going to do this again because it's going to be for a larger audience, I think. But there are some good speakers on that and some updates on our news. So do look out for that. We'll be sending you information on that soon. Okay. Thank you again, Caroline. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.